Commander Rakim had been enjoying her morning coffee when the first explosions lit up the sky. The peaceful mining colony of Kepler-4 for 2b was known for its quiet sunrises and the gentle hum of excavation equipment. Children played in the streets, while their parents worked the mineral deposits that made this little world so valuable. It was the kind of place where the biggest worry was usually equipment breakdowns or bad weather. All of that changed in seconds. Massive Vorthok warships dropped out of hyperspace like angry metal mountains. Their hulls were scarred from countless battles, and their weapons glowed with deadly energy. Ra had seen pictures of these ships in military briefings, but seeing them in person made her stomach drop. Each vessel was 3 times the size of their entire colony defense station. "Get that emergency beacon online," she shouted over the screaming alarms. The command center shook as plasma bolts tore through their defensive shields like paper. Red warning lights flashed everywhere, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. Technician Bo Park was only 22 years old, fresh out of the academy. His hands shook as he worked the controls, sweat dripping down his face. "I'm trying, Commander." The main transmitter took a direct hit. Through the reinforced windows, Ra could see buildings exploding in the distance. The residential district where Bo's girlfriend lived. The school where Commander Ra's nephew attended classes. These weren't military targets. The Vorthok were, deliberately hitting civilian areas. "Got it." Bo screamed over another explosion. Signal transmitted. "But Commander, the nearest human fleet is 3 months away. Even if they left right now, ... He didn't need to finish. They both knew 3 months might as well be 3 years. The building shuddered violently as another blast hit their shield generators. Sparks flew from control panels, and Ra could hear the groaning of metal under stress. They had minutes at most before the shields failed completely. Ra grabbed the emergency communicator with both hands. This might be their last chance to get word out. Her voice was steady, despite the chaos around her. "This is Kepler Colony, to any human forces. We are under attack by Vorthok Empire forces. They came without warning and are targeting civilian populations. Repeat, we need immediate assistance. They're systematically destroying residential areas and civilian shelters." The transmission shot into space, carrying their desperate plea across the void. Ra knew it was hopeless, but she had to try. Somewhere out there, someone had to hear their cry for help. As the last shield generator exploded and Vorthok ships moved in for the final assault, Ra whispered a prayer that humanity would remember them. Ambassador Yu Li had been sitting in the Galactic Council chambers for 3 hours, listening to the same pointless arguments. The massive chamber was built to impress, with floating platforms for each species and holographic displays showing real-time updates from across the galaxy. Right now, those displays showed the burning colony of Kepler-4 for 2b, but the aliens around her seemed more interested in procedure than people dying. The Altarian delegate was a particularly annoying creature, with slimy tentacles that he waved around when making points. His translator made his voice sound bored and superior. 3 months minimum travel time to reach the colony, he said, dismissing human lives with a casual gesture. Diplomatic channels should be pursued first. The Vorthok Empire has always been reasonable when approached correctly. You bit her tongue. Reasonable. The Vorthok had just slaughtered 1,000 civilians in the first hour of their attack, but she kept her face calm and neutral, the way her training had taught her. The Centauri representative nodded agreement. These blue-skinned aliens prided themselves on being logical and measured. Historical data shows the Vorthok respond to negotiations 73% of the time. Hasty military action would be unwise and could escalate the conflict unnecessarily. Around the chamber, other delegates murmured their agreement. The fish-like Aquarians bubbled something about maritime law. The crystalline Zelari made musical sounds that translated to concerns about trade disruptions. None of them seemed to care that human children were dying while they debated. You had heard enough. She stood calmly, her movements precise and controlled. Every alien I turned to her, probably expecting another human emotional outburst. They always thought humans were too quick to anger, too willing to fight. "Honored Council," she said, her voice perfectly polite, "humanity deeply appreciates your measured approach to this crisis. Your dedication to proper procedure is truly inspiring." The sarcasm went right over their heads, just as she'd intended. "Please excuse me. I have some administrative matters to attend to." She walked out of the chamber with dignified steps, ignoring the continued debates behind her. Once the massive doors sealed shut, Yu pulled out a small, unmarked device from her jacket. It looked like an ordinary communication pad, but this one was connected to networks that officially didn't exist. Her fingers typed a simple message. "Operation Ghostlight is authorized. Wake the fleet." Across human space, in hidden bases and secret installations, ancient protocols that had been dormant for decades suddenly came alive. Systems that weren't supposed to exist began powering up, and people who were officially retired received calls. They'd been waiting 50 years to answer. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had really been so peaceful all these years. Admiral Jae-song had been living quietly on a small farming moon for the past 15 years, growing vegetables and reading old books. His neighbors thought he was just another retiree who'd served in the merchant marine. They had no idea he'd once commanded the most dangerous fleet in human history. The vibration started as a low rumble in his cottage floor. At first he thought it might be an earthquake, but then he recognized the familiar hum of massive reactors coming online. The hidden base buried 3 miles beneath his farm was waking up after decades of sleep. His communicator buzzed with the message he'd been waiting for since retirement. "Ghostlight activated. Report to station immediately." 20 minutes later, Jay stood on the bridge of the HSS Phantom, watching as officers he hadn't seen in years took their stations. Some had gray hair now, others walked with slight limps, but their movements were still sharp and precise. "You never really forgot how to be part of the Ghost Fleet. How long since we've run a full activation?" asked Captain Min Ko, settling into her familiar chair at the tactical station. She'd been running a small restaurant on Europa, but her fingers still knew exactly which buttons to press. 53 years, Jay replied, watching as status boards lit up across the bridge like a constellation of stars. Each light represented a system coming online, weapons charging, engines warming up. "Looks like humanity finally has need of the Ghost Fleet." Throughout the outer systems, similar scenes played out in hidden bases that didn't appear on any official maps. On an asteroid mining station that was actually a weapons depot, Commander Dal Shin watched as massive railguns emerged from fake rock formations. Inside a seemingly dead moon, Captain Yoon Park supervised the launch of stealth destroyers that had been sleeping in underground hangars, 300 vessels, each one equipped with experimental technology that made regular starships look like children's toys, powered up from their secret hiding spots. Ships that officially didn't exist, crewed by people who were supposedly retired or dead. The galaxy's intelligence agencies had spent decades trying to find proof of the Ghost Fleet, never realizing it was hidden in plain sight. "All ships report ready," announced Communications Officer So-Yun, her voice carrying the excitement they all felt. She'd been teaching kindergarten on Mars, but her skills with quantum encryption hadn't faded one bit. Admiral Jay smiled grimly as he looked at the tactical display showing all 300 ships, red dots representing the most advanced combat vessels humanity had ever built. "Then let's remind the galaxy why they used to fear us." Captain Jun Lee had experienced hundreds of hyperspace jumps in his career, but the Ghost Fleet's experimental drives were something entirely different. As his destroyer prepared to jump, he gripped his chair with white knuckles, and tried not to think about what the drive was actually doing to the space around them. Initiating fold sequence, announced Navigator Park from her station. She'd been Chen's navigator for over 20 years, back when they flew regular patrol ships. Now she was operating technology that most scientists said was impossible. The jump drive didn't just push ships through hyperspace like normal engines. Instead, it grabbed the fabric of space itself and folded it like a piece of paper, bringing two distant points together for just a moment. The ship would slip through the fold, then reality would snap back into place behind them. John felt his stomach lurch as the universe twisted around them. Through the viewports, stars stretched into impossible lines, then compressed into tiny dots, then exploded into brilliant flashes of light. The ship's hull groaned under stresses that shouldn't exist, and for a terrifying second, John wondered if they would emerge in one piece. Jump complete. Next, coordinates locked in, reported A, her voice steady, despite having just experienced something that broke every law of physics she'd learned in school. The tactical display showed their new position, already 3 closer to Kepler-4 for 2b. What should have taken weeks in normal hyperspace had happened in minutes, across the sector. Alien sensor stations were going crazy. On the hegemony monitoring post near Proxima, a young Altarian technician stared at his readings in disbelief. The sensors showed ships moving at impossible speeds, leaving energy signatures that matched no known technology. "Sir," he called to his supervisor, "I'm detecting an unknown fleet. Velocity readings they can't be right. These ships are moving faster than theoretical maximum hyperspace speeds." His supervisor, an experienced Centauri officer, checked the readings himself. "Unknown fleet detected," he transmitted urgently to Fleet Command. "Velocity impossible, according to all known physics. Recommend immediate alert status across all systems." But by the time their warning reached the nearest command center, the human ships had already completed 2 more jumps and were halfway across the sector. The aliens' fastest courier ships would take days to cover the same distance. On the bridge of his destroyer, Captain John Lee allowed himself a small smile. For 50 years, humanity had let the galaxy believe their technology was primitive and limited. The aliens had grown comfortable thinking they understood human capabilities. They were about to learn how wrong they'd been. Vorthok Fleet Commander Kethfer had been having a very good day. The human colony had fallen faster than expected, with minimal resistance from their pathetic defense systems. His warriors were already loading the valuable mining equipment onto transport ships, while the surviving colonists sat in detention cells waiting to be sold as slaves. Kethfer was personally inspecting the latest batch of prisoners when his bridge officer burst through the detention bay doors. The young Vorthok was breathing hard, his scales flushed with excitement or fear. "Commander, multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Massive fleet incoming." Kethfer felt a moment of annoyance. Probably some merchant vessels that had stumbled into the wrong system. "How many ships? And why are you interrupting me for a few lost traders?" "Sir, the sensors are reading 300 vessels, all military class." The mining equipment Kethfer had been examining suddenly seemed unimportant. 300 ships. That was impossible. The nearest human military base was months away, and their intelligence said humans only had small patrol fleets in this sector. He rushed to the bridge, his heavy boots clanging on the metal floors. Around him, his crew was scrambling to battle stations, but their movements seemed slow and confused. They'd been expecting an easy cleanup operation, not a major fleet engagement. On the main screen, Kethfer saw something that made his blood run cold. 300 human vessels were materializing in perfect formation, dropping out of hyperspace with precision that spoke of advanced coordination. Each ship was sleek and deadly, unlike the bulky exploration vessels they'd encountered before. Their weapons were already powering up, energy readings climbing to dangerous levels. "How?" he whispered, staring at the tactical display. The nearest human fleet was 3 months away. We monitored all hyperspace lanes. No fleet could travel that distance so quickly. Unknown, sir, replied his tactical officer, his voice shaking. Energy signatures are off all known scales. These readings don't match any human technology in our databases. For the first time in his 30-year military career, Kethver felt real fear. He'd fought against dozens of species, conquered countless worlds, and never met an enemy he couldn't defeat. But looking at these human ships, with their impossible arrival and unknown capabilities, he realized that everything the Vorthok Empire knew about human military strength had been completely wrong. The humans hadn't been weak, they'd been hiding. Admiral Jae-song stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the Vorthok fleet through the main view screen. The enemy ships were still scrambling to form defensive positions. Clearly shocked by the sudden appearance of the Ghost Fleet, he could have ordered an immediate attack. But Jay had learned long ago that sometimes the best weapon was fear. Admiral, called his tactical officer, the Vorthok are trying to use the colonists as human shields. They're positioning their ships near the populated areas. Jay's jaw tightened. Typical Vorthok tactics. When facing a superior force, they always hid behind innocent people. But today, they were about to learn that humanity had evolved far beyond their understanding. Target the outer moon, he said, his voice calm as ice. Single shot, maximum yield. Weapons Officer Honam looked up from his console, confusion clear on his face. Sir, the moon, sir, not the enemy ships. Ho had served with Jay for 15 years, but he'd never seen the planet cracker cannons fired at full power. Most of the Ghost Fleet's weapons had never been used in actual combat. They'd been too dangerous, too likely to cause galactic incidents. But today, subtlety was not the goal. Do it. Ho's hands moved across his controls, targeting the small, rocky moon that orbited Kepler-4 for 2b. It was about the size of Earth's moon, covered in ancient craters and completely lifeless, perfect for a demonstration. The planet cracker beam lanced out from the flagship's main cannon, a focused stream of energy that could tear apart molecular bonds at the atomic level. The beam hit the moon's surface and began boring straight through to the core. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the moon began to glow. Bright white at first, then brilliant blue, then a color that hurt to look at directly. In less than 10 seconds, the entire celestial body became an expanding cloud of superheated plasma, spreading out in a perfect sphere of destruction that was visible even from the planet's surface. On the colony below, the survivors stared in wonder through the broken windows of their shelters. Engineer Tae Lim lowered his binoculars, his hands shaking. That's impossible. Humans don't have that kind of firepower. A weapon like that could destroy entire planets. Commander Ra Kim stood beside him, watching her people's saviors reveal their true might. Apparently we do, she whispered. In the Vorthok fleet, absolute silence fell across every bridge. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes, but to the Vorthok warriors, it felt like an eternity of impossible horror. Commander Kethver had fought in over 100 space battles, conquered dozens of worlds, and never once retreated from an enemy. But what he witnessed that day shattered everything he understood about warfare. The first Vorthok attack came exactly as their battle doctrine demanded. Plasma cannons fired in coordinated volleys, enough destructive energy to vaporize any known starship. The bright green bolts struck the human vessel's dead center. Perfect hits that should have ended the fight before it began. Instead, the plasma passed through the human ships like they were made of air. What just happened? Kethver demanded, staring at his tactical display. Direct hits on 12 targets, no damage registered. His weapons officer was frantically checking his systems. Sir, our weapons are functioning perfectly, but the enemy ships, they're somehow shifting their molecular structure. The plasma's passing through empty space where solid matter should be. matter phase technology. Kethver had read theoretical papers about it during his academy training, but every scientist agreed it was impossible. The energy requirements alone would drain a ship's reactor in seconds. Yet here were 300 human vessels casually shifting between solid and energy states, making themselves untouchable. Meanwhile, human weapons were tearing through Vorthok shields like tissue paper. Captain 1SEO watched from his cruiser's bridge as enemy vessels exploded in brilliant flashes of white and orange. The human weapons seemed to adapt instantly to whatever defensive measures the Vorthok tried. Their shields can't adapt fast enough to our rotating frequencies, he observed, watching his tactical display show another enemy destroyer breaking apart. We're cycling through 17 different energy types per second. Tactical Officer G. Park nodded grimly as she watched the slaughter unfold. It's not a battle, she said quietly. It's pest control. The Vorthok tried everything. They attempted ramming attacks, only to watch their ships pass harmlessly through phased human vessels. They fired their most powerful weapons, only to see the energy absorbed by shields that seemed to grow stronger with each attack. They even tried to retreat, but the human ships moved faster than anything the Vorthok had ever seen. In the final moments, as his flagship's systems failed around him, Commander Kethver managed one last transmission. His voice was broken, filled with the terror of a warrior who had discovered there were forces in the universe beyond his comprehension. Impossible. Then his flagship joined the expanding debris field that had once been the pride of the Vorthok Empire. Admiral J. Song stood alone in the communications center of his flagship, surrounded by glowing screens and quantum transmitters that could reach every corner of the galaxy. The bridge crew had cleared out, giving him privacy for what would become the most important broadcast in human history. Through the viewport, he could see the glowing debris field that had once been the mighty Vorthok fleet, a warning written in fire and metal. Open all channels, he commanded quietly. Maximum range, all frequencies. The communications officer nodded. You're broadcasting to every known civilization, Admiral. Estimated reach, 4 billion receivers across 200 star systems. Jay straightened his uniform and stepped before the main transmitter. For 50 years, humanity had played the role of peaceful explorers, letting other species believe they were just another weak newcomer to galactic society. Today, that lie would end. This is Admiral J. Song of the Terran Defense Force. He began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Today, the Vorthok Empire learned what happens when humanity's civilians are threatened. This fleet represents less than 5% of our true military capability. He paused, letting that terrifying fact sink in across 1,000 worlds. If what they'd just witnessed was only 5%, what could humanity do with their full strength? Any species that targets human colonies will face complete annihilation. This demonstration was a mercy compared to our full response. You have been warned. The transmission ended, but its impact rippled across the galaxy within hours. On the Centauri homeworld, military analysts stared at their screens in disbelief, frantically calculating the implications. If the Ghost Fleet was truly just 5% of human military strength, then Earth possessed enough firepower to conquer the entire galaxy. The Altarian High Command called an emergency session, their tentacles writhing with anxiety as they reviewed footage of Vorthok ships being destroyed by impossible weapons. The hegemony's intelligence networks went into overdrive, desperately trying to locate the other 95% of humanity's hidden arsenal. Trade routes shifted overnight as merchant species began avoiding any system that might anger the humans. Diplomatic envoys raced toward Earth, carrying offers of alliance and peace treaties. Several minor empires that had been planning attacks on human outposts quietly canceled their operations and pretended they'd never considered such actions on a dozen worlds. Alien children would grow up hearing bedtime stories about the day the humans revealed their true nature. and the galaxy learned to fear the species they'd once dismissed as harmless explorers. 3 days after the battle, space around Kepler-4 for 2b was quiet again. The ghost fleet had vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared, leaving behind only empty space and the fading radiation signature of their impossible engines. The rescued colonists were safely aboard evacuation transports, many still in shock at what they'd witnessed. Commander Rakim sat in the medical bay, staring out at the stars through the small porthole. A nurse had bandaged her wounds, but her mind kept replaying the moment when that moon simply ceased to exist. "How long do you think they've had weapons like that?" she asked the medic. "I don't know," the young man replied quietly, "but I'm glad they're on our side." Across the galaxy, intelligence agencies were working around the clock to rewrite everything they thought they knew about humanity. On the Altarian homeworld, intelligence analyst NHO submitted her emergency report to Galactic Command. Her tentacles trembled as she typed the classification changes. Previous assessments of human military capability were 98.7% inaccurate, she wrote. Recommend immediate reclassification from moderate threat to extinction level threat. Their peaceful exploration program appears to have been an elaborate deception, lasting over 50 years. The report sent shockwaves through alien military establishments. Species that had dismissed humans as harmless scientists were now terrified of what else might be hiding in Earth's seemingly innocent colonies. Meanwhile, the peaceful human exploration ships continued their scientific missions, exactly as they had before. Captain Bin Quan docked his research vessel at Centauri Station, just as he'd done dozens of times. But this time, the alien port authority practically bowed as they processed his papers. The same officials who used to make jokes about human technology now spoke in respectful whispers. "Everything appears to be in order, Captain," the Centauri officer said nervously. "Please let us know if you need anything at all." Ben smiled politely, just as he always had. He didn't mention that his research vessel had enough firepower hidden in its cargo bays to level the entire station. That was humanity's greatest weapon, the galaxy's assumption that they were weak in hidden bases throughout human space. The Ghost Fleet waited patiently for the next emergency signal. Admiral J. Song had returned to his quiet farm, tending his vegetables and reading his books. But his communicator sat ready on the kitchen table, waiting for the day when humanity would need to remind the galaxy of this lesson again. The universe had learned to fear the humans, and that was exactly how Earth wanted it.